planning. Now, I've straddled both sides of the planning fence so I can see both sides of the crazy planning spectrum. Prior to having kids, I planned everything. My life felt so orderly and organized, and sometimes boring as it left little room for spontaneity. Now, after having kids, and three, if I'm being honest with y'all, I gave up planning altogether and I've opted for the day to day living that was dictated by coughs and runny noses and everything in between there, too. As with most things, all extremes have pros and cons. Living somewhere in the middle is ideal, and that's true when it comes to planning for you, my author friend. This season of the Empowered Author podcast is all about planning. I've shared my tips to planning each year so far, and I've also been diving into specifics on planning aspects authors may need as they pertain to where you are in your book journey. Today's episode, though, is a real treat. You see, every Wednesday, myself and my dear friend Jennifer Crosswhite come together to talk about different elements of books. And we do it in a weekly Beyond the Page live stream. I'm pulling some of my key takeaways from two live streams where we've discussed the topic of planning to write a book. Y'all, it was too good to not share here too. And I promise that you are in for some awesome insights. If you are planning to write a book this year, I want to make sure it's one that works for you and is one that people will purchase. Ready to uncover the tricks of the trade? Let's dive in. Hey, I'm Stephanie Feger, and Empower is my middle name. Okay, well, not really, but I think it should be. I believe that empowered people empower people, and I'm obsessed with empowering you, the nonfiction author, with impactful marketing strategies to help you take your important message and share it with those who desperately need it and want it and will buy it. I am the owner and chief strategist of the Empower PR Group and the author of several books myself, including my newest one, Make Your Author Impact. Sell more books, increase your reach, and achieve your why. I have been called to merge my love for reading books and writing books and marketing books to help nonfiction authors like you with laser-focused strategies and tactics to ensure that you are writing books that sell, promote your books to those who need and want them most, and build meaningful businesses from empowering messages. It is a delight to me to have this podcast for you, and I want you to think of it as your one-stop shop for marketing insights from an author who has been there, who has done that, and understands exactly where you are, because I do. So get your pens ready because I'm ready to empower you. This is the Empowered Author Podcast. Let's talk about planning to write a marketable book before you ever really put pen to paper. I want to just articulate first and foremost, I didn't just say to write a book. I said to write a marketable book.
Yeah.
And I really think that is a game changer if you want to be successful. And I don't care if it's fiction or nonfiction. You have to write a book that is marketable. And what I mean by that is it's a book that will sell.
Yes. I think the thing people have to think about, and I always ask clients when they come to me, what is your goal for this book, right? Yes. Sometimes you are just writing a book for yourself, for your family, your friends, totally fine. I'm on an editing loop, and one of the questions that came in yesterday was there was a person who wanted to tell their side of a story that had kind of been out in the public or whatever. Yeah. Totally fine. But the market for that is going to be people that know you, your friends and family. Like the general public, frankly, doesn't care. I think there's wonderful family stories. There's wonderful family history with Amazon and print on demand. It makes it so easy for everybody in your family to get copies. It's a wonderful idea. So I would never say to someone, oh, don't write that because it's not commercial. Correct. But be very clear up front what your goal is, because you don't want to write a personal story that's only interesting to your friends and family. And then you're trying to market it. And you're like, why does nobody care about this book?
Who's the book really about? Yeah. So I love all that. And that actually takes me to the first point. If you are going to write a marketable book, meaning you're going to write a book that will sell, you need to know who needs your book.
Yes. Who is your audience? Who are you writing this for? And it's not everybody.
It's not everybody. But beyond that, take it even deeper. And it's not just not for everybody. But you need to know, are the people you're writing it for, do they see that they need it?
Right? How far down the journey of transformation are they? If your book is like 3 steps in, then that's a very particular market. And the people that are early on may not realize that they need that book. So I always like use like a financial, if you're writing a financial book, there's all sorts of levels of financial literacy and sophistication and things like that, right? And so if you are writing a book that requires a little bit extra, people already have the basics down, do not be marketing it to the basic people. They don't even know that they need, like, they're not even aware that they need this kind of thing. And so sometimes in your marketing campaign, and if you do like any courses or any pre-work, you can kind of prep people and take them to get them ready for that, depending. But be very, very clear where you are on that transformation journey for those people. Now, sometimes you'll see people that they write an intro book, like a beginning level, and then they write a more advanced. But be very clear on that.
Absolutely. I like to share what I had a podcast host recently tell me. I'm going to coin it, Jen, the brownie principle. The brownie principle is a whole story.
There's a whole story about brownies in your book.
I maybe I'm going to do an author cookbook, Jen, where we use these different.
Fun.
This is the joys of Stephanie Brain. But the brownie principle really breaks apart. Do you need the brownies or do you want the brownies? There's more to the story, but that's true. So at the end of the day, when your target reader is going down the grocery store aisle and they see a box of brownies, do they go, oh, that's wonderful, and they just put that 99-cent box of brownies or whatever it is nowadays in the cart because they need it? Or do they sit there and go, those extra calories, I don't know. Should I spend the money on this or that? I don't know. Is it for a special holiday? Oh, we'll see, right? A marketable book is the one where they're like, absolutely, I need a corner brownie piece today. Put it in the cart. So when you think about your book, I want your target readers to not sit back and reflect on, gosh, is the $20, is it going to add more complications to my life, or is it going to help my life? Is it going to be worth the investment, or are you just trying to sell me to something else? Is it going to be transformative? Like, think about that even in the fiction world, y'all. Like, this concept is pivotal because if you find your target reader and they see you as a need, they will buy your book. And knowing that will help you in your writing for it.
That's absolutely true. They need to see your book as a need. I mean, you have to be so targeted. They're like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I saw something on Twitter the other day. It was a picture of a book, and whoever was posting it was like automatic buy. Like that book, they were like, I see that book. I have to have it. Like, I just have to have it. It sounds fantastic. It's exactly what I'm interested in, blah, blah, blah. You want your book to be that way for your reader, where they're like, you've read my mail, you know exactly what I'm struggling with. And
it's like the iPhone that's listening and the ads start populating. Where'd that come from? Yeah, that's it. Yes. So as you're planning, know crystal clear who needs your book. The second thing, so that one's about them, not about you. But I think the second thing, Jen, is, okay, so now about you. How are you going to use your book? What are you going to do with this book? Is it to write it and be done, which is fine. That's a different process. But is it something you want to use in how you work with people? Is it a part of a series? Is it a part of an online course you have? Is it a part of coaching work? Is it a workbook that I don't know. Is it a lead magnet to bring? Only you can articulate that, but knowing that will make sure that you are writing it the right way.
Yes. So true. Because it's not only just the audience, but it's refining what you're doing. So does it need a companion workbook? If you're going to be doing it in like a group work setting, a workbook is super helpful. When I wrote my book, Eat the Elephant, my coaching clients were like, I want a workbook. Like, you have all these exercises. I want to work through them as I'm going through my book. And I thought, wow, I don't work that way. So it would never have occurred to me. Someday I will get a workbook out. But it's on my list because I thought, that's really, really helpful. It's different if you're like, it's something that you're just handing to clients. It's different if you're speaking and it's going to be in the back of the room. So all of those things are very, very important to be thinking about up front as far as how you're going to structure the book, the message of the book, and what other ancillary products you're going to create off of the book. And that's
Absolutely.
it's really important to think about.
This book I'm working on is around my health diagnosis that I had got this about a year ago nowadays, this time a year ago. And I have done a lot of thoughts and questions on how would I use the book, right? And it actually became very directional in getting clarity on that. So it's very much a memoir of the journey of what it was like to deal with a chronic illness. But at the end, because I think that there's value for this message to be used for caregivers to better understand and for medical professionals to better understand what it's like from the patient standpoint, I have added 2 sections in the book where I interview my husband and I interview my doctor in a very conversational way,
Right.
but in a to help understand their perspective of the story. And that's very intentional because it's meant to, now if I'm able to talk to nurse practitioners or the types of doctors that helped me get my diagnosis, I will have insights included, right? So knowing how people will use it will help you go, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that probably a caregiver could pick this up and appreciate better understanding what a chronic illness looks like.
Yes.
And then the caregiver is also represented in it, right? And
Yes.
so whether it's a memoir, whether it's a fiction, whether it's a business book or anything in between, I think knowing how you're going to use it gives you so much guidance and so much perspective.
You can't, not to say that you can't fix it afterwards,
Sure.
but it does make it, because you do find sometimes people write a book and it gets out there and it goes a different direction than you planned. And then, you can come back and adjust. But like with many things in life, if you can plan it out front, you can be more efficient, maybe a better use of your resources. I mean, there's all things where as we've gone on this journey, we're like, oh, if I'd known that, I wish I would have done that differently.
Right.
And so that's part of the advantage of working with professionals, is that we have not only our own journey, but lots of other authors on this journey. And so we can say, well, you might want to consider this. You might not have thought about this. This is something to think about. Mm-hmm. And so those are great ways that we can help you work on that before you get too far down the road.
Right. I just had a chat with an author today who was working on his 3rd book, and he was working on his keynotes, and his 3rd book is in alignment with his keynote. But we had a deep reflection today about how he wants to use the book and where he wants the book to take him. And we uncovered his need for having a business framework, having a business model, and then leveraging this forthcoming book to align with his business model so he can use it in so many different settings. And it was an aha moment. And that just goes back to knowing how you're going to use the book and what you want it to do for you. Which takes me to the 3rd thing I want to just touch on is, how are you going to get it done? How are you going to get it done? Books don't write themselves, Jen, do they?
No.
Even if you get a ghostwriter, it still doesn't write itself.
Right. Even if you do. And that's a total legitimate thing to do. But then you've got to make time to meet with the ghostwriter, to answer the questions, to review the drafts, those kinds of things. Again, that's a fantastic way. A lot of business people will do that, or people who have things to say, but writing isn't necessarily their strong suit. Certainly is a great way to go. But even if you're doing it yourself because you want to, I mean, regardless, you are going to have to block off time to get it done. There's just no way around it. It just is going to take time. Like anything in life that has value and is important to you, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, no, there's many ways you can do that, right? So I found this year when I cranked through my manuscript for the book for the year, going to the mountains, that gave me like away time. That was wonderful. I've been finding recently getting up a little bit early gives me time. But another creative idea I just want to share is, depending upon the type of book you're writing, I have found it was a lot easier for me to write my latest business book because I had been in the this past year has been and honestly, several years, I've been focused on content sharing. And so I had already articulated some of these ideas that were in my head and noodled through them. So, a way could be, as you are getting it done, it could be that you want to leverage your LinkedIn lives or social or video content in the first half of the year, so you can articulate it and then transcribe it in the second half of the year and turn into a book. There isn't one way to do it, but you do have to think about how you're going to do it, because it will not happen if you don't think about it.
I think that's a great way. One of the things that's fantastic, it used to be back when blogs were bigger, and this still works for some people. They would blog a book.
Mhm.
Basically, they'd take their ideas and they would blog about them. And then, that would become the bulk of
Right.
what ends up being their book. But you
Right.
can still do that with social media, with LinkedIn Lives.
Yep.
And the nice thing about that is you're kind of putting out little nuggets or little chunks
Yep.
of it, and then you get feedback. And you can either incorporate that feedback. It might make you think about something different. People might ask clarifying questions that makes you realize, oh, I actually need to talk about this more, or I forgot this earlier point I probably need to establish first. And it's a really great way to get that reader feedback before you've actually put your book out, and in smaller chunks. And at the same time, it's building your platform. It's getting people interested in the topic. It can definitely be a win-win-win all the way around.
I love sharing content and then reflecting backwards and seeing what could be packaged into it.
Yes. I love that. I think that's such a great way to do it. It's a really smart way to go about it as well. So you're writing things that your audience wants to hear about, and you're not having to put the whole book out first.
Right.
You're able to talk about the topics, and maybe your audience wants to go deeper in a section that you really hadn't thought about. And that can be really, really helpful.
I'm a believer in working smarter, not harder, Jen.
Right.
Today's topic is a part 2 of last week, where we talked about planning for next year, and if writing a book, and a marketable book especially, is on your to-do list. Last week we talked about the things you need to think about to really make sure your book is marketable. And today I thought we would spend some time talking about, great, those things. How do you get the book out of you? And maybe it's getting a waterproof board for your shower, or an app to allow you to do. But I think the key takeaway, in my opinion, is the fact that you have to set aside time or create boundaries where you do not allow external stimuli to come in and rob the time that you have for something you have deemed a priority.
Yes. And I think that is a key part of it. We are everybody can reach us. When I was out with COVID, I had an out of office on my email, but people could reach me through Slack. People could text me. People can reach me through every social media app that you can't put out of offices on. Right. And so you start thinking about all the ways people can get to you all the time. There's very few places people can no longer get to you, like the shower. Usually, sometimes if you're driving, they're more limited, right? People can still call you when you're driving. I think that's a huge part of the problem is creativity. It needs some time. I call it the compost pile, right? It needs some time to sit and to change from the carrot tops and the eggshells and the coffee grounds into that beautiful soil amendment that wonderful things can grow from. And that is a process.
I love this is so funny. And those listening, Jen and I literally we have a topic, but we don't, and we have a couple points, but we just let it roll. So when we make a comment oh, we planned that, it's an inside joke because we didn't. It's just proof that we have synergy in how we see life. And you're talking about this compost pile. And I, in my previous world, when I was focused on my first 2 books around finding perspective and kind of shifting and sifting, I shared a lot, a specific story with people. You've been to the house. You were at the house when it wasn't veggie growing season. In fact, I think our tomatoes were about half dead. But there was a time that in our previous home that people would say, well, oh my gosh, Stephanie, how is your garden so great? Because we have a really big garden at our old house. We do a bigger one now. And I would say, oh my gosh, are you kidding? It's the manure. And I'm like, dude, the rest of the world forgets about, the garden in the winter time. And that's when we cover it in horse leftovers. And it composts.
Yes. When I was when I lived in Michigan, we would get milk from a local dairy, and then they would let you come and get all of the cow droppings, mixed with the hay and everything, right? The grass and all that, very natural and part of the whole cycle. And you would get it, you throw it on your garden. And I mean, it's just fantastic. And there is some sort of creative equivalent to that, right? Like the movies you watch, the books you read, podcasts you listen to, you're refilling that creative well. And that takes, it's over time that feeds into your ability to produce good work. And if you are starving yourself of that because you're going busy, 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 then you don't have any time for that to refill. You like just pull from it all the time with nothing to refill it. And I went to a mineral springs this weekend with a friend of mine. They have all these different mineral pools, a saline pool, hot and cold pool. Oh, the cold. Green, and there's everything is kind of in these little nooks, and it's just super, super relaxing. There's a mud bath. That was really kind of fun. I felt like an 8-year-old playing in the mud, but it was so relaxing. I mean, we came out of there, and they have massages and stuff. I didn't do any of that, but I felt like I had a massage just from, I mean, you can't do anything. You cannot work when you're in a hot mineral bath, right?
So
and
find those.
You know, this is a great way to come with some writer friends and just brainstorm and just chat, because it's that organic conversation playing off of each other. And so she and I spent some time talking about that and thinking about it, but it was very unstructured and in nature and all that stuff. And I felt like this needs to happen like every quarter, because you need that time to refill when you're, and most of us that are writing have other obligations. Like we can't, like writing is not our full-time thing, you know, as much as we would love that to be, it's just very, very rare. So writing ends up happening kind of in the margins of life. And we do have to block off time for it, but we also have to block off time for doing things that doesn't look like you're doing anything, like watching a movie or sitting in a tub or whatever it is that is refilling that creative well.
So this summer, I was having exhaustion moments, and my husband could tell. And he surprised me with a weekend getaway. And I don't know how this has happened, but this year, the mountains have become our place. I don't know why. Because maybe it's like 2 hours from our home and we can go for a day and go hiking and all's good. So I bring my computer, and I had plans, and so we had someone watching the kids, and I was going to do some work, but I was going to do it in like a different space. And I get there, and Jen, I have my own internet. Like my business has its own internet because I live in the country with no internet. And I carry it everywhere with me. Like it's like gold, okay. I get there and my own internet doesn't work. And I'm like, this is a problem. And I had like a panic moment for a hot minute. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, I probably shouldn't be working this weekend anyways.
It's a sign.
But you know what happened? Because I had no internet, I woke up one morning with this weird inspiration. And that's when I wrote like 20 or 30,000 words on this book. Like it just poured out of me. Like it was the fact that even though there are other demands, there was a space where I didn't know about it. So the stuff that was inside that was begging to get out could. Like, I guess tip number 1 is you have to make time. You need to not just make time saying, I'm going to do an hour a day. You need to do it in a way that provides you the ability of turning off external stimuli. So a couple tips, like I have on my phone, you mentioned all the ways people can get a hold of you. That is quite annoying, Jen.
It is.
To be effective, like this 24-hour news cycle and all these things, 24-hour business, all it's just annoying. So remember, if you hear nothing else today, know that the world can have their kind of processes and ideas, and you get to choose how that fits in. So I do not get any notifications on my phone. I made that shift, and it's like, oh my, it was so freeing, right? Turn them off. Then you choose.
Turn off the little bubbles that tell you how many emails you have, so you don't have to be stressed by that, right? All that stuff is off. I don't
turn it all off, because that
I'll
just
know when I go
anxiety. Yes,
it does. It creates a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
And the other thing is, depending upon the demands other people have or the notifications, one of two things is happening. Number 1, when you reply and respond all the time, you're creating an expectation for other people. So stop doing that. And number 2 is the notifications are to trigger for you. Oh, well, somebody liked something. Stop that too, because that form of acknowledgement is not real. Let it go, people. Let it go. Stop the comparison.
Right. I think there's a dopamine cycle there that needs to get broken. There's a lot of people have talked a lot about the brain science behind that, but it's very similar to like gambling or other addictive kind of behavior. So it can be very hard to break, but if you want some creative space in your world, you have to do something like that. One of the
Mhm.
things I talk to my writer folks about is you want to trigger, you again, use that brain science, but use it in your favor. So
Mhm.
something that triggers, this is creative time, this is writing time. So
Mm.
wherever that is, some people do need to like leave the house and go to a coffee
Yep,
shop,
yep,
2 hours on Saturday. Some
yep,
people have a space in their home.
yep.
So wherever it is, think about the space where you're going to do your writing and see what you can do with that. So for example, think of your five senses. Can you have something that in the
Mm.
five senses that you only do when you write?
Love
So
that.
smell, right? So some people, if you have an office, you can burn a candle, you can
Right.
diffuse certain smells like
Yep.
peppermint and stuff. Those are like supposed to be stimulating to help you think.
Mm.
Even if you're going to like a coffee shop, you could use like a scented hand lotion or a essential oil or something, right? Just a little something that, I mean, smell is super powerful at a subconscious level.
Yep.
So if you can think of a smell that you only use during writing time,
Mhm.
that is a fantastic way to trigger your brain to say, this is creative time. Same thing with taste, right? Is there a mint or a gum that you only
Or a
use when you're
tea?
writing? Or a tea? We got the same mugs today, right?
Yes, we do.
Or a certain snack,
Yeah.
something like that that you only do with writing.
I love it.
Visually, of course, this is your space, right? So do you have almost all writing programs and computers have an isolation mode or a
Like a
composition
focus
mode,
mode. Yeah.
focus mode where everything goes away other than what you're working on. So
Yeah.
perhaps you do that. Perhaps you create a vision board, a physical one or a Pinterest one, and you spend a few minutes looking at that and getting realigned to what
Mm.
you're trying to do, what you want to accomplish before you get in there. Hearing. Well, some people love music, some people hate it. If you are a music person, do a playlist you only listen to while you're writing, or
You know,
maybe nature sounds. Find
yeah,
the thing that, but only do it
when you're
when
doing
you're
that.
writing. So again, it's another
Brilliant.
trigger. And then finally is touch. Well, of course, we have our keyboards, but we do those with all sorts of things. I have a fidget ball. I used to have
I
sea
always get my
glass.
pins out and I start, breaking my
Yeah.
pins apart. If you ever
So
notice, I'm always holding a pin so that I can do that.
do that.
Uh-huh.
So find something. And again, whatever it is, there's lots of fidget toys in the world. Or maybe I have this is a domino, but it says, write those books on it.
Oh, I love
And
it.
it's the idea of the first domino. What's the first domino you need to do to have the domino effect, right?
I love
And
that.
so, a little thing that is inspiring for you. But like I had sea glass I would fidget with or what, because you're not going to be writing all the time. You'll be thinking it sometimes. So you'll need something to play
Oh, I
with.
love that.
So
I'm also a doodler. I think I'll show
yes.
you some of my doodles like I doodle now the same thing. The best thing that ever happened to me is a world that turned virtual because when I would work in person in my previous careers, people would be like, stop fidgeting, stop doing this. And it's like, oh, no, no,
Mm,
no. It's not that I'm nervous. It's literally, or
you're a
doodling, like
tactile
it
person.
actually helps me.
If
Yeah.
I'm doing something with my hands, it's like I'm actually taking what I'm hearing and putting it into a tangible
Mhm.
form.
I love all that, Jen. Those are all beautiful, and they're things that I didn't realize I was doing or that have
Yeah.
done. But if you do it purposefully, it's going to help you make sure that book comes to life. Now, I want to pick
Mhm.
your brain about, all right, so now we know the importance of time and setting it aside and creating an experience that triggers creativity. What about the content? How would you make a recommendation? Because and I know there's 1,000 ways you can do it, and each is
Mhm.
unique to individuals. But I have a lot of people ask me, well, where do I start? And I have some ideas, but this is
Mhm.
your jam. And I'm just curious, what would you say, either from like a layout or content standpoint, would be a tip or two that you would recommend?
Well, I think the biggest mistake people make is they think you start at the beginning and
Yeah.
you just write the book all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that does not happen. And that'll just make you really frustrated.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as layers
Mhm.
or like as a skeleton. First you do the bones, then you put the muscles, then you put the skin on it and make it pretty. But think about layers, and then you're going to refine that as
Yeah.
you go along. The other thing I recommend as part of those is to do a brain dump. Just whiteboard, paper, whatever, and just everything you think you might want to talk about, put it down
Yep.
and just get it all out there. Don't worry about order or anything like that. And you might take a couple days to do this.
Mhm.
But once you have, okay, I think I have everything I want to say about this subject, then you start looking at what are the things that can be grouped together. So then you start putting, kind of little chunks of areas together, right? So you've got little groupings. So maybe you take another piece of paper and you start thinking about the groupings. And then that gives you, basically, that's giving you your chapters and your subheadings kind of under those thinking. Then you start thinking about, how does this flow? What is the journey I want to take the reader on? What endpoint do I want to get them to?
Right.
And that helps you construct the thing there. And so then, then now you've got, when you sit down to write, now you have something to write about, because there's nothing worse than looking at that blank page and going, I don't know what I'm supposed to write about today. Well,
Yeah.
now you have your chapter, you have your subheadings, you know the things you want to talk about. And so that just makes it so much easier.
Yep.
Other than, don't ever, I mean, even in fiction, there's a lot of work that goes in before I sit down to write the book. Yes, I pretty much do. When I get to the writing point, I do write chronologically. Though I know
Right.
people that skip around. I do, but I do all those, I answer all those questions, and I spend usually a month ahead of time working out, what are these people's issues, what's going on, and usually have about 100 to 120 points of things that are going to happen in the book before I actually start writing it. So I know where I'm going. So every time I sit down to write, I know what point I have to get to next. And
Right.
so,
Yep.
it just is a lot easier when you have a roadmap. And the same thing happens, when we're talking about nonfiction too. You need to have this roadmap. And so think about writing in layers, and knowing that when you're writing something, you're just getting your thoughts down. This does
Yeah.
not have to be perfect. You're not writing the final version of it. You just want to get your thoughts down, so you have, again, that kind of rough skeleton, so you can look at it and go, okay, is this the order I want? Does this make sense? Sometimes you're writing something, you go in a different direction, or whatever. So hold all of that really loosely, because what'll happen is, if you get so caught up in trying to make the words perfect on the page, you just start spinning
Oh,
your wheels. You don't
yeah.
have enough to know if it's perfect yet or not. You got to
Oh,
have a lot in there before you know, do I want to keep this? Should I move it? Is it worth refining? You
yeah.
need a bunch down there.
You
So
need to get started. I'll share a couple of things that I've done and that I've seen, especially in the nonfiction space. I can imagine fiction with everything you were saying. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work in the fiction world. And I think it's amazing. But if you and you could leverage a lot of that in both. But there's a
mhm.
couple of things I've utilized that might be helpful. The first was, my first book was a blog to book book. I didn't realize it
Yes.
was a blog to book book,
Right.
but it was a blog to book book, meaning
Mhm.
I sat down when I decided to do it, and I looked at all the content I had,
Yes.
and I started to go, what are the commonalities?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, and before I knew it, I had a working manuscript of stuff I'd been sharing with the world and I'd been crafting
Mhm.
over time. That is awesome, because then you can identify the gaps and focus your energy and writing kind of energy there. So I always
Yeah.
like that, because that's smarter, not harder work.
And if you're a thought leader, if you've been posting on social media, if you have website content, you probably have more content already written than you know.
Yeah,
Like, you probably have a lot there already. Yes, it's not going to stay necessarily in that same
sure.
form, but you've talked about this, and you can kind of plug some stuff in, and then you can
Yes.
massage it. You probably have a lot there that you
Yeah.
just don't know about. And so do not waste that. Make sure you're
Right.
using that, because that's, like you said, work smarter, not harder, right?
Right. The other
Yeah.
thing that I'm doing now with my fourth book, which is a memoir, is I've found at this point, when I sit down to write, I'm a divine inspired writer, meaning when it's time, God tells me, and then it
Hmm.
just flows. And so I have found that I have to know kind of all the opportunities, but when I'm ready to sit down and write, I can look at the structure and figure out what feels right to fill in. I'll give you for instance.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know what I'm writing about for this book is a chronological story. So the meat of it actually has to go in order, or
Right.
the flow feels off.
Right.
However, I sat down one day, and Jen, I wrote the best about the author section,
I
because I
love it.
knew I needed it. And
Yeah.
many people think that the about the author should be the same for everyone. I find that as beautiful, fun marketing opportunities, and I get
Right.
creative. I mean, now I look back and go, how did that come out? That is like such a cool about the author. But it's because that day I'm like, I'm ready to write. What can
Hmm.
I write about? Or my
Yeah.
acknowledgments, or,
Yes.
I noticed in this particular book, where I'm talking about a health condition that I have. I realized I needed to do at the end an interview with my husband and an interview with my doctor for a medical perspective and for a caregiver and a medical professional. Well, I
Mhm.
sat down and was able to write those. Now my manuscript's not done, but I was
Right.
inspired and it got a surge that day. So I have
Yes.
found, like you shared, knowing your skeleton allows you
Yeah.
sometimes to jump depending upon what you're most
Right.
motivated with that day.
Yeah, find the part that's gonna be fun or that is gonna be you think this is gonna be easy. "Oh, this might not come
Yeah,
till chapter 8, but I really know that," or that some I just had that conversation the other day, it's fresh in my mind.
yeah,
Feel free to write it. Yes, you might, futz with it by the time you get there, whatever, that's fine, but a lot of times once you start writing the part that's easy, then
mhm,
you find yourself being able to go to the part that's more difficult.
yep,
And if you are more of an outline person, I worked with a gal who had a very, very detailed table of contents outline. So she could jump around and do the parts that were easier and then move into the hard parts later. And so if that works with your book that you're writing, and even in memoir, like you're saying, you can do because you're writing about specific instances.
yeah,
There might be a story that you're like, I feel like today is the day I
yeah,
want to write that story,
yep,
you
yep,
know? And so definitely leverage where you have the most energy.
mhm,
Again, that's working smarter, not harder. Go to
yes,
the place that's easiest because I tell people, and anywhere that has lived in the snow understands this. When you have the snowplow come down the road and they push this big berm of snow over your driveway. It's just huge,
yeah,
right? And if you don't go out there and get rid of it, it turns into
right,
this icy
yes,
mess that you cannot get over. Now, I've only
every
had four-wheel drive cars when I lived in the snow, so it never really mattered. But if you have like a Honda or something, you're never going to get in your
word,
driveway, right? You can't get
right,
over that.
no,
I think that hump there is also like a creative hump
yeah,
that when you first sit down to write, it's like this, it's just hard. It's hard to get over it. Once you get over it, then it's smooth sailing and you can get going. But
yes,
those first 15, 20, 30 minutes sometimes are really hard to get over. So
yeah.
anything you can do to make that easier, to get over that snowplow hump, do it.
Sometimes that's like a writing prompt. You can go on YouTube,
Yes.
I'm sure, and find one where
Yeah.
you could just look at something totally abstract and be inspired to just get your juices flowing.
There are plenty
I
of
found that
people who
helpful.
totally believe in journaling, the morning pages, journal pages in the morning to just get it flowing. I think that can be a really great technique. So make it easy on yourself. Do what is easy. It's totally fine to be easy.
Are you looking to write a book this year? If so, I want to ensure that you write a book that others will buy. I'll say that again. This needs to be a book that others will buy. That is, my friend, what I call a marketable book. Now, this requires some prep work from you on identifying who your target audience is and outlining how you are also going to use this book with them. You have to have a plan to make it happen. Make a commitment to yourself now to schedule time to do that plan. Put it on the calendar, hold that time as sacred, and make it happen. If you would like some help for planning this year, listen, give us a shout. We are plan gurus over here, and I would love to help you create a plan that is workable for you and one that you will use. Visit empowerprgroup.com/connect and let's chat. All right, author friend, thank you for listening today and for saying yes to becoming empowered. I believe you are destined to make an author impact, and to do so requires a path to get there, and a plan can help you. As you know, I'm a believer that empowered people empower people. I've empowered you. Now it's your turn to empower others.